Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over the O-rings for the Hornady LnL AP and some of the accessories for it. To start off with, I'm going to go over a little bit of information on O-rings. When you buy O-rings, they're going to be known as dash numbers, which is always the last number on the end of the number. If you see numbers in the front, these are always the manufacturer numbers. So you might just have, for example, like here, you may just have some type of numbers or letters, and that's all has to do with the manufacturer for their information. If you see AS or MS, that would be for, it's actually designated for aerospace, so it meets aerospace specs, and MS is mil specs. So if you ever see any of that, they're going to be basically a tighter tolerance, but the sizes are going to be the same. They have less tolerance in it. So as stating before, at the beginning, this is always a manufacturer number. So this manufacturer number right here is always going to be what tells the information of the O-ring, as example, what type of material it is, if it's silicone, Buna-in, or nitrile, or neoprene, or etc., which means there's all kinds of different materials O-rings are made from. It also will define what you will see as what they call a durometer, or sometimes it's even under shore, and that is the hardness of the O-ring, and you'll see that it either be a 60, 70, 80, or 90. 60 is your softest, 90 is your hardest. And then the dash 19, this is the part right here. Like if you were to look up a dash 19 O-ring, if you were to Google that, that's where you're going to find it's going to give you the specs of the size. So this number right here, no matter who the manufacturer is going to have the same size, which is going to be that, for example, for the dash 119. So if it, and then on these numbers right here, you're going to see, if you look up a chart, there's actually O-rings that are dash 001 to dash 0, or excuse me, dash 001 to dash 900. So those are going to be all the different O-rings out there. And this is for your American Standard size. Now, if it's metric O-ring, metric O-rings, instead of a dash number, they're always going to be using part of the size of the O-ring, which is going to be, for example, one of the O-rings I will be going over will be 3.1 cross section by 24.4 millimeter ID. So the sizing would be, instead of a dash 19, it would be just showing up as 3.1 by 24.4, and that's how it comes up for metrics. Now, kind of going over some of that, we will go over the sizes that's on the equipment. First example, right here, this O-ring right here, this is the O-ring that is actually for your bushing. So if it's for any of your dies, or if it's the bushing for your powder dispenser, that is actually what I just gave you the example. That is a dash 19 O-ring. The size on it is 15/16 ID by 1 1/8 OD by 3/32 cross section. It's got a durometer or shore of 70, and the material is a Buna-in. On these here, I don't use these O-rings too much, because on the press itself, I'll show you here in a second here. They don't have a lot of resistance when locking. So, for example, with the powder dispenser, a lot of people know about the powder dispensers. They kind of walk loose. As you can see here with that, I can actually take it with my finger and lock it in place. There isn't a lot of resistance on it. So on that O-ring, there is an alternative. Actually, two different alternatives. One is, as I stated before, on the powder dispenser, Hornady themselves has, on the O-ring, you can actually see that right there. There's a spacer right there, or a shim, I should really state. And you can see it's got a slit on it. And Hornady has a fix for that by giving, you can ask them for it, you can call them, and they'll give you a package of shims, which will be just like that. You'll get like 2 or 3 or so like that. And you add the shims as needed to give it a little bit more resistance. So when you slide your O-ring on, you lock it in, it's supposed to be tighter. Only thing I don't like about that is it still doesn't have a lot of tension, and I like to lock a lot of my dies, so I would have to have a ton of those shims. So alternative for that is there is a metric O-ring you can get, which I will show you a picture of all these O-rings so you have a listing of them. But this one is a metric, and the size on that is a 3.1 by 24.4, and the full size of everything is a 24.4 millimeter ID by 30.6 millimeter OD by 3.1 cross section. Again, it's same material, so it's a Shore or Duramato of 70. Material is a Buna N. And as you can see on this one, I can't turn that by hand, so you actually have to use a wrench to lock that in. And you can see, no matter what I do, I can't work that out. And if you look at the O-ring on that one to the factory O-ring there, you can see there's a little bit different size, and that little extra size in the metric size is what allows a little bit more resistance on that. I use these on a lot of my dies instead of using the shims. So those are the two O-rings for the bushing. Now, going back to now, we're going to the powder dispenser. Now, if you're using, of course, you got the rotor for both, a different one for pistol and one for router, or rifle or pistol, sorry. And that's all going to depend on your sizing right here. This one's a rifle one. You're going to have an O-ring here. And to go over that O-ring is a -029 O-ring. The size is 1.5 inch ID by 1 5/8 OD with a 1/16 cross section. Shore Durameter is a 70. Material is Buna N, which all these O-rings are going to actually be a Shore Durameter rating of 70, and the material is going to be a Buna N. So that is your replacement for that rotor. Now for your meters, if you got the rifle or the pistol, if you're using the stock, which I don't use the stocks, I use the multimeter ones. They do have O-rings in here, as you can see. So this O-ring right here is going to be the same on either one. And the size on that one is a -112. The size on that is a 1/2 inch ID by 11/16 OD by 3/32 cross section. Shore rating of 70. Material Buna N. I think I went over this one with you. If I didn't, I'll go over it again. That one is -029. The actual size is 1.5 inch ID by 1/5/8 OD with a 16th cross section. Shore rating of 70. Material Buna in. And then if you use any of the bullet feeders, you're going to see there is an O-ring right there. The O-rings on those are, that is a -114 O-ring. The size of the O-ring is 1 5/8 ID by 13/16 OD by 3/32 cross section. Shore rating of 70. Material Buna in. Another O-ring on the unit is actually the O-ring on your tube here, your feeding tube. That's adjusted to hold it up basically in position where it needs to be. That's what that O-ring's for. And the feed tube O-ring, that number is a -115. The size of the actual O-ring is 11/16 ID by 7/8 OD by 3/32 cross section with a shore rating of 70 and material being a Buna in. Now if you have, I'll come over here. If you have take this off here. It's gonna be easier holding the camera here. If you have the control panel, you're gonna have on your primer sensor and the powder dispenser sensor, you're gonna have adjusters here. So you got a weight adjuster, which normally these are steel. I made one out of brass, but you'll see that there's O-rings right there. And let me flip it upside down. You got an O-ring on the bottom side, O-ring on top, and that is to hold that weight in position where you adjust it at. And on that, let me grab a paper. So on that size, that is a -004 O-ring. The size on that is 5/64 ID by 13/64 OD with a 16th cross section with a shore rating of 70. Material Buna in. And then the other one is on your powder dispenser sensor. I already loosened this one up a little bit. On the bottom you're going to have an O-ring, and on the top you have an O-ring. Of course it goes down to it. Same thing, it's adjust. If I get that to focus. It's adjust, so you adjust it where you want, so when it hits the limit switch here, the micro switch, you can adjust it to whatever, where you want it to start setting off the alarm that you need to add more powder, you're almost out of powder. And on that O-ring, that is a -009 O-ring. The size of the O-ring is a 7/32 ID by 11/32 OD by a 16th cross section with a shore rating of 70 and Buna in as material. Now that pretty much covers everything I know of for the Hornady LnL AP press and the accessories. Now if I did miss something, please let me know. I will research it and find out what the numbers are and add it. But I will show you. I will actually post these on like a if you just look up the same name under Facebook or X, I'll post these pictures of these so you can print them off, keep them on hand. But all these are standard American except basically a difference. I got one O-ring I'm going to go over here with you. That's just kind of extra. But the metrics, there's two metrics. This one's just kind of a bonus. I'm still not completely sold on it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I'll kind of hold this still in case you wanted to screenshot that. But a lot of these are also used because it's a common size. They're used in the plumbing industry. So you'll see on the sheet, I'll have some of them. But in the plumbing industry, there's a brand called Danco. And they'll have O-rings for faucets and stuff like that. And they're all Buna in material, 70 Shore. And for example, like this Dash 19, if you, at your local hardware store, if they carry the Danco O-rings, look for the Danco number 62. If it doesn't have it, I'll just have NA for not any. And you can see as I'm scanning here, some of them have a Danco 10, Danco 12, 13. Of course, there's none for that one. But anything that's common and it's used in the plumbing industry and this company makes it, I will list that just so you don't have to order it. Of course, you can get all these O-rings that are the standard, none of the metric. If you call Hornady, they will replace them. I like to keep myself some on hand. It's easier, especially if you need it. You don't want to wait. The metrics, this is what I normally use for the bushing. I don't really use the factory size. I like to use that instead of using the shims. Now, I'm going to go over this. This is something, it isn't done by me. His channel, I'm not sure if he's the originator of it. I believe it was, don't quote me on it, I believe it was like JT Bolt, like 002 or something like that. But he goes over talking about using this O-ring in place of the shell plate spring. And the size on that is a 2.5 by 69. It's a metric, and the actual size is a 69 millimeter ID by 74 millimeter OD by 2.5 millimeter cross section, 70 shore rating, and material is Buna in as well. But it's supposed to take place of that. So as you can see right here, there's your O-ring in place of the spring. He claims it's to help with the shell plate. Some people call it the shell plate shake or the shell plate wobble. It's for the jumping. So when it clicks into each mode, people are getting the powder. This is supposed to be, he claims, to prevent that. It does stop the shaking or the wobble as a claim. The only issue I have, and I really haven't tested this yet, so this is be something you'd have to do on your own to determine if it's right for you, is right here is where I feel there's problems, because I had to kind of oil this O-ring a little bit. As you can see how it snapped down. This is where I've had some, like that actually popped out. That one popped out. See how that one caught there? That's where I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on these. It just doesn't seem to, if this gets too dry, it grabs, I've noticed, and it kind of keeps it raised up. So I think that would be where the problem would be the most on that. So you would definitely, if you were to do this, you would have to have some type of, like a water-based grease, like a plumber's grease or something on there to keep it lubed all the time. So I mean, it's not all the time, but it, you know, it only takes one and it messes up on you. So just something I wanted to show you. Just not something I came up with. I just happened to see it. I thought it was interesting. I just haven't had time myself to test it. But if you want to go off that paper, get yourself some, test it yourself, you can. I can tell you right now, there's not a lot of choices on O-rings on those. They're just not a common size, so it's not as easy to find as a lot of some of your standard sizes O-rings. Um, the other metric one, I don't remember having too much problems. The one for the bushing the metric to give it a little more resistance and keeping it locked in place. I didn't have a problem finding that one from what I remember, but I've had a lot of these O-rings for that I purchased brand new a long time ago. So just using a little bit of remembrance if I had any problems. I don't recall any. Hopefully this helps you out. Like I said, I will post the pictures on. You can find it on both Facebook and X. I'll have the pictures, so if you want to take them and print them out, keep them on file, so you always know what the sizes are. You can. If I missed a size, maybe I overlooked something, let me know. I will. If anything, I will get the sizes and I will update it in the description, and then you can note it on your sheets, or maybe I'll update it on the sheets and then you can just reprint the sheets. All right, well, thank you for stopping by. I hope everything helped you out on O-rings for the Hornady Lock and Load AP presses. Have a good one.